Good evening, my beautiful black geniuses. This is the show y'all all been waiting for, so brace yourself because we're about to have a great show today. Today we are talking about the legacy of the war on drugs, and in particular, how much the war on drugs has cost us in black wealth. So, as always, you're watching the Black Wealth Project. Sunday, we do our weekly town hall meeting, and like I said, today's topic, we will be discussing the impact, the cost, the effect of the war on drugs on black wealth. So do us a favor. As everybody comes in, everybody gets settled in. Hopefully y'all got your popcorn. Y'all got something to drink. Let us know who you are, where you're hailing from, and what your thoughts are on the cost on black wealth by the war on drugs. But before we get started, just got to say what's up to the Black Wealth team, the super team, especially to Mr. David Ruffin here, who came in the room late. What's up, David? DR?
I was definitely on time. I was in the back.
You were not. We were all here. We're supposed to be on stage at 7. Here we are at 7:01. You strolling in. That's not on time.
He is
David Ruffin. Kamari, man. I wasn't in the show, man. I been Kamari. I was waiting for him to let me in.
Yo,
and true to David Ruffin form, you're gonna blame it on everybody else.
Yo, but before we slander him though, right? Before we get started to slander him though, I want to give a shout out to the brother Malik, man. Cause yeah, let me tell you why, right? So I talked to Malik last night, right? And I was talking about some of the stuff I'm working on, what I got going on. And Malik gave me like a pep talk, man. He told me I was thinking too small. My numbers is too small. He said with the content you got and the stuff you're doing, you should be here. I mean, he got me so motivated. I almost sent him a Cash App as like my business coach. You know what I'm saying? Like, so he told me off last night, man. But I felt motivated, man. I haven't felt that motivated since TM 101 came out. But so I want
motivation.
I want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to Malik, man, for checking me and telling me I'm thinking too small, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. We got to move the culture forward, man. So I'm doing my best, to help everybody. Yo, I'm like LeBron right now, just passing the ball up. Everybody complains I'm not scoring, but I'm still dishing it off. It's cool, man.
David Ruffin doesn't assist, brother. You gotta find somebody else. AI, maybe.
New name.
In all seriousness, y'all, we started something last week. I think we're gonna keep it going. But how's the team doing? How's the super team?
Sweet.
Hey, listen, I
ain't gonna lie, man. The energy around this election is crazy, though, man. I can't even do my normal stuff, man. Everywhere I go, I'm trying, to try to get my mind off of what's going on in the election. It just keep popping up, man. People can't stop talking about it, and so, not that they should or shouldn't. It's just for my taste, it's too much.
Yeah, we definitely are getting inundated by it. There's no doubt about that. But you know what? Here's a question for y'all. Do y'all really think 50 endorsed Trump?
No.
Has 50 Cent ever voted?
I don't know.
Nah.
That's a great question. And you know what? Your voting record is actually public.
Oh, well, hey, there you go. We need to find out if he's ever voted.
I don't think so. Like I think that these days, like if the way it is, at least on my timeline, if you don't come out as being like so pro Biden, they just say you're Trump anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it's funny, right? Because I'm seeing everybody dogging 50, but if you really know 50's resume, he's a professional troll. Like he gets off on this. He gets off on being contrary, like lying for the sake of being contrarian, right? Mm-hmm. Like he just makes stuff up. So I saw like
only thing, but
I don't really believe he actually endorsed Trump. What were you saying, Malik?
So right now, I could if he was doing that, I could believe it, right? Because you understand this, right? When you really look at it, like I'm not a politician, never been inside, right? But looking from the outside in, the Republicans in general really have two things. One, you're talking about small tax and small government, so the wealthy people would rather donate and support that party because it's going to help their pockets. Like Sheldon Adelson put up $100 million of his own money, right, to get Republicans in office because it'll be cheaper for him to do so. But the Republicans, they also have, for some reason, somehow, they have the religious right. Like people associate like Christianity and Christian values to Republicans, whether it's rightly so or not, they push it. And so when you look at the majority of this country, whether they go to church or not, most of them feel like they're Christians. So they want to vote for the people that's have Christian values. And then the wealthy people are going to put money into that campaign. So if you're going to hit deep into the pockets, and we're talking about like, you know, over 400,000 having to pay, you know, upwards of 62%, when you think about, you know, voting your interest, if you're talking about 8, 9, 10% more of my income, my interest is aligned, is not with the Democratic side. I'm saying if you're over that, it's just not. And
yeah,
so,
but 50 been getting money for years, right? So in 2016, there is a Hot 97 interview with 50 and the whole team, Ebro and all of them up there. And he said Trump and them tried to pay him $500,000 and he turned it down. So if he turned it down in 2016, I'm fairly certain he probably would have turned it down this year too, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you have a point, but I think to Malik's point about this 60% tax rate, that's a combined state and federal tax rate. And we have to realize that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, that was actually a Republican push on Democratic states because they took away what's called the state and local tax deduction. So they said it's capped at 10,000, and those blue states have a higher, have basically being said, you know, you have this combined, but it's not, it really doesn't affect everybody. And I think it's very frustrating when I see that people that, I don't know what people make. I'm gonna mind my business when it comes to people's salary. But based on the numbers, the number of people I see commenting on the tax code, and I'm like, I know you guys are not part of the 1%. I mean, I'm gonna like roll the dice, but you know, if I was a betting woman, I would definitely say that the people commenting aren't even like anywhere close to it. And the thing is that, you know, and that's frustrating me because, but again, everybody thinks the tax code is this magical, mystical thing that kind of just pops up on April 15th and like spreads its wonderful goodness all over the world. And that's not the case, y'all.
But I think both you guys have a point. What I took from what Malik said is bad marketing, right? Because half of the stuff that, you know, what people believe is not even true. Like that 62%, it's not even true, right? When I saw that meme and I went back and looked at it, it was like you said, it was combined, but it also didn't take into account any sort of deductions from like, you know, business expenses or things of that nature. So it's like it's not even true. But that goes to Malik's point in terms of marketing.
It's an income tax and not a revenue tax. And so most people who got that kind of money make revenue and not income. And so they're not going to be paying that. All of the people you think that would be paying that are not going to be paying that because because they make revenue and not income.
But
and
the
most
thing
people
is,
don't know the difference between revenue and income.
Well, to Malik's point, though, the marketing is terrible. You know, the marketing is not the same. That message should be out there. And I know some people try to put it out there, but you know, I don't know, man. Like, you know, I don't even want to get into this, but the bottom line is marketing is bad.
I think Republicans are just better politicians than Democrats. It is what it is. Like they
absolutely not.
I think I know what he's trying to say.
I know what he's trying to say.
So you don't think
better campaigners?
Well, I mean,
if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, according to the Daniel Thomas. So I mean, you know,
listen, they stay on code, right or wrong. Listen. Republicans are like Gillian, though, major figures, man. You know, whether you're right or we wrong, if it's beef, bring it on. Like they don't. It's like MF. It's like no, they stick to the code. Don't matter. Trump can do whatever.
I call that the Slim Charles theory from The Wire. He said, "Look, man, sometimes you got to fight on that lie. Even if we know it's a lie, we're gonna stick together and we're gonna fight on that lie." So
yeah,
you know,
listen,
shout to Slim Charles.
Listen, the Democrats condemned Al Franken for a picture from 1976. Bro, come on.
So Malik, you're right. I think you're right. There's a purity test that the Dems go through that the Republicans do not. And I do think that is very to the point of marketing. I think it is a very interesting marketing issue. It's like they do tend to say on code. The Democrats are like cats. It's like trying to herd cats. Like they go everywhere, and it's counterproductive. So,
I think we have to be very careful with our because when we say they're better politicians, they aren't, because the Dems tend to do governance better, because that's the whole point of being in office, right? And I told you last week, both parties are trash, right? So this isn't a pro-Dem thing. I'm just looking at the two. Republicans, if you look at what they're doing right now, the Senate hasn't passed a bill in the longest time, and they're just sitting on their ass, twiddling their thumbs and collecting a check. So, I'm just saying, I know sometimes I can be a little literal, but I think it's important to be literal, especially when we're broadcasting out to folks, because I'm seeing so many people. We kind of had this debate before, right? But so many people just kind of mixing and moshing everything, right? There's a comment on our IG. Shout out to Conscious Tees. Shout out to Conscious Tees. They left a comment on one of our latest posts talking about both parties being trash. Now they said we should pull back from national elections, and I'm like, and that's because everybody is saying it, right? Everybody's saying politics is local, and I get it, but it's a nuance. It's a very nuanced thing, and you got to understand it. National politics impacts local politics, and vice versa. But again,
so I mean, I
can't breathe. They didn't say that. That wasn't said.
I know this is not a political show we're getting into, but I want to say this, man. I personally believe that we really need more Black Republicans. I think we need more people in the Republican Party, right?
And you got to have people at every level, everywhere.
Level, everywhere.
I don't disagree with that statement, but they have to be aligned with what Black people want. So you could call yourself whatever, Republican, Democrat, or whatever. But if you're not aligned, like my thing is, politicians aren't aligned with the people want, period, regardless of party. And that's so you can have all the Black Republicans in the world, and we got 1 million Black Democrats, but they're not aligned with what the people want, so it doesn't fucking matter.
Well, listen, I know that when Malik was talking about campaigning, and I know I brought this up last week, but that book was just that excellent. The book Rat Fucked. And in there, he talks about overall as a country, we're more progressive overall. But because of the strategic nature of the other side, they found a way to still get their worldview across, even having less people that actually believe in what they believe in, right? So it goes to that game again. Like, you have to be strategic with everything you do. They strategically have just as much representation with less people that believe the way they believe. So
more representation.
Yeah, but check that out, right? There's a great book. I got to check out that book, Jimmy Radfuck. But there's another great book called Dark Money. And so
I listened to that. It's about the brothers, the Koch brothers.
Yeah, well, the Koch brothers, the Koch,
Koch, whatever you want to call them.
Yes, thank you, Koch brothers. It's about the Koch brothers out of Wichita, Kansas. But what they did is they're writing curriculum in places like Harvard. And so when you're writing curriculum in places like Harvard, you are changing the entire mindset of a group of very influential people to be very
But even that was strategic. I read that book as well.
Yes.
And that's another excellent book. And they strategically did it. Yeah, they strategically did it because they felt like some of the West Coast schools like Stanford and such were so left-leaning that they went to the middle of the country and funded specific professors, specific institutions. So now they have all sort of thought leaders coming out of those institutions that believe what they believe. So again, that's all about strategy too. That's another excellent book, though. Another excellent book.
Money, which is why we got to get our dollars up.
And one thing mentioned in Dark Money, last thing I say before we get into the show, one thing mentioned in Dark Money is that they actually say in there that the left doesn't do enough of that. Like, there's wealthy people on both sides, but the people on the right who have wealth tend to invest in their thoughts, right? It's not just about investing in property or stocks and things. They actually invest in their thoughts because they want to see, their point of view carried out throughout the world. So they invest in that.
They're trying to change the culture.
And they made they made a comment like the left likes to buy big houses where and I know they were like being, it was a lot of hyperbole, but they were just saying that on the other side, they'd rather take their money and, get their point of view across.
They want to infiltrate their worldview. It's the tyranny of the minority. And that's where we are right now. We're being I just caught the confirmation hearings for Judge Amy Coney Barrett, and I was listening to a Republican speak on her behalf, and she's like going on, and I'm like, she's like, she believes in family values, and I'm like, No,
Whose family?
Like exactly whose family? And that's the thing. It's like your job as the Supreme Court of the United States is to determine, if a policy, a law, whatever violates the Constitution. And the interpretation of the Constitution is fluid. I mean, you had but for the Warren Court of the 1950s and the 1960s, we would not have what we have right now, which is Miranda. We also had Brown versus Board of Education. We wouldn't have those seminal cases that we as a community, the Black community, needed. And there's a 1935 case. It's called the Caroline Products. It's footnote 4. Everybody talks about it because it's kind of the foundation and the basis of judicial work, I should say, because I don't want to call it advocacy, but it basically says the political process is set up in a way that it basically harms those that are minorities. And they say discrete insular minorities, and they're talking about Black people. They're talking about people of color.
Well, Courtney, hold on. I want you to give a point of clarity real quick because we know you love to go into case law. So when you say the Warren Court, what exactly does that mean?
So Chief Justice Warren was the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and each court is kind of named for the Chief Justice. So this court that's currently sitting now is the Roberts Court. The Roberts Court is looking to be a lot more conservative. So each court is kind of called by their Chief Justice. But the Chief Justice, I think Warren was appointed by Eisenhower, which is interesting enough, but he was the most progressive. That was considered the most progressive court of the United States history, period. But that's where we got Miranda, because everybody doesn't know that Miranda didn't exist at one point. And Miranda, for clarification, is you have the right to remain silent. Anything that you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And you also have the right to counsel. I forgot what else it is. I'm not a criminal attorney. But
real quick before you go for it, why is Miranda important? Because you brought it up.
Because it tells people their constitutional rights. So when you have an interaction with the police, you have a right to remain silent. You have a right to an attorney. You have all these rights that are guaranteed to you as someone who's being detained or arrested. And that's also another point of question and clarity. But you have a right to understand all your rights and exercise them in a proper way. But a lot of people didn't know what their rights were. So the Warren Court was like, no, you have to tell people what your rights are. You have to tell them. And so if they choose not to invoke them, then that's completely up to them. But they at least have to know what their rights are. So that's why you have a Miranda warning. But before that, we were getting jammed up because people just running their mouths. They were saying anything, and it was being used against them in court because, that it could be used. So it really changed the tenor of how criminal justice or criminal prosecution was happening.
And a great recent example of that is the Central Park Five or the Exonerated Five. Mm-hmm. They confessed under coercion, under duress, and it was illegal, and they didn't know their rights. Their parents didn't know their rights, and they were minors too. So,
I was going to say they were minors.
Right. But moving right along, listen, everybody, again, you are watching the Black Wealth Project. We are on live every week, Sunday, 7 p.m. This week, we are talking about the negative effects of the war on drug on Black wealth. Again, the negative effects on the war on drugs, or AKA the war on Black people, on Black wealth. Do us a favor, chime in the comments. Let us know what your thoughts are on it. All right, and moving right along to our next topic, it's the BOB of the week. And this week, Mr. Jimmy is presenting us with that great company.
Yes, sir. You have the website, right? So yes, the Black-owned business this week is All This Math LLC, which is run by brother Akil Parker. He's a mathematician, a Black mathematician who specializes in not only tutoring services for students, but also their parents. And he does it in a way that's relevant to the culture. So he has a system he uses called hystematics, where he mixes African history with mathematics. And it's very effective because what he recognizes is how math is actually marketed to our people. Mm-hmm. So he takes time to market in a different way and make it culturally relevant to help the students learn. And he does an amazing job, right? And I think it's important to highlight a Black mathematician. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've caught a couple of Akil's lives. They're pretty dope. I mean, he breaks things down very, very simple and plain where everybody can get it. And that's so important. We definitely got to work on stepping up our math skills. So definitely shout out to Akil.
Absolutely. Allthismath.com.
Allthismath.com. We will definitely put that in the chat as well. And so again, Jimmy, he does tutoring for students, and I'm assuming he's doing it all virtual now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You have the website, right? So the Black-owned business this week is All This Math LLC, which is run by brother Akil Parker. He's a mathematician, a Black mathematician who specializes in not only tutoring services for students, but also their parents. And he does it in a way that's relevant to the culture. So again, Jimmy, he does Yeah, he has virtual. He actually just started a YouTube page to do some sort of lessons for people that don't have his services to take a look at. He takes requests and he'll do his IG, but he can be hired to do like Zoom calls or whatever, depending upon what you need.
Okay.
Before COVID, he was actually meeting in person with certain people, but at this point, everything is virtual until we get past this. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Allthismath.com. All
What's
right.
good? Hey, so look real fast here. Come here. Stand up, boy. Now you being shy. So how do you like your tutoring? What's that? You want to say it now? You don't want to say it?
He's actually taking all this math right now.
Yeah, nah, exactly. He's shy. Go ahead.
He is?
Listen, he wouldn't to be every time. He wouldn't jump in the screen every time except when I ask him to. Get out of here, man.
Yeah, he want Papa's attention. I get it. I get it. Shout out to the youngin.
So now we got him in there. My son, he enjoys meeting with Akil.
That's dope. How old is your son?
He's 8.
How?
He's 8.
Great.
So it's once a week now. I might put up to 2 days a week if he has time.
Okay. Well, shout out to Akil. Shout out to putting a big emphasis on education. That's definitely something we need as we fight to increase Black wealth around the world, but especially in the United States today. But listen, everybody, again, topic of the day: negative effects of the war on drugs, or AKA the war on Black folks, on Black wealth. Tell us what you think about it. Go on and check in. Before we move into the topic, let's check in with the folks real quick. Fiali, I believe it's Fiali, right? How you doing?
What's
up?
How are you? Hey, Don.
You're done. Angela.
From the A.
From the ATL.
What's up from the
A?
North Carolina.
Atlanta, the COVID capital.
No, I thought it was Jersey. Thank you, teacher.
Not at these last parties they had a couple weekends.
Oh, wow.
Adrian from Chicago. Shy.
Don is from NC, but he was raised. Don is from Mount Airy. So, Don, quick question for you. What was your zip code? Please put that in the chat and let us know.
Don't even start. Don't even start this on here, yo. Don't even start this on here.
What's up, Sean?
Don, you don't want the smoke. Just don't even engage with Mario on that point. That's
going on.
Not worth it. Hey, Marvin.
Courtney's just mad. She called him back up. Prove me right. That's all I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna leave it alone. What's up, Marvin? How you doing, brother? Mr. Ruffin with the gems.
I can't.
What's up, Alvin? How you doing, brother?
What's going on, fam?
Agent Hustle. Yo, I love that name. How you doing? Agent Hustle. This is your first time.
That's what they say.
All right, this is a dope name. Like share. Thank you. Yes.
That's right, Don. Like and share. Please like and share.
We are fighting the algorithm, so please
you're gonna be our manager, Don. We're gonna sign you up to be our manager.
Right?
Right?
No, because we know how that works with Teddy. What was it? Marvin in the Blue Notes. What was it? What was his name?
Harold Melvin.
Sorry.
No. You should be ashamed of yourself for not knowing Harold Melvin.
But I was giving
Corey, she only knows my name.
No, Don said 19119, so he's fine. But anyway, I'm sorry, Harold Melvin in the Blue Notes. I was just flustered, y'all, because what happened is I didn't know this. I got this story, just shout out to the Sound of Philadelphia. So apparently Teddy, Pendergrass was like the man. He was the man of this group. But Harold Melvin got his name put on the marquee like he was doing something. That's something that David Ruffin down there would do.
No, right. So Teddy P did a David
marketing. That's good marketing.
Teddy P did a David Ruffin. Is that what you're saying, Courtney?
No, I'm saying
Harold Melvin did it. Harold Melvin did the David.
Hold up, though.
Harold Melvin started the group.
What I'm saying is, if you go back and read the stories, though, how dirty he was doing them was crazy. My man was in the front of every cover. He was paying him like $200 a week. Meanwhile, Teddy was out there singing his heart out.
I didn't know that.
Give him like $200 a week. They got
I think he was crushing.
Watch the It's in a couple books, but it's also in the Teddy Unsung. They talk about a little bit too.
Yeah, I watched
Unsung. That's a dope series.
By the way, the Teddy Pendergrass documentary on Showtime is awesome. I saw that. I didn't see
it's in there too.
It's in there. Maybe okay.
All right, I'll watch it.
Hey, Monica. Since nobody else want to say, hey, Monica.
What's up, Monica?
Jim. Hey, Monica.
All right, Melanie Down said, breaking up the family unit, that was massive. There was no nation building without family. I agree.
Hey, Ty.
What's up, Ty? How you doing?
Ty.
Karan says a bunch of other cultures were pretty much allowed to pivot their criminal activity, not us, though.
No.
That's true.
That's true.
Hey, Wanda.
Hey, what's going on, Wanda?
That's the right zip, though. That's the right zip, though. That's the right zip code.
Hey, Don, follow-up question. Is the only zip code for Mount Area 19119?
Yes, and please don't be getting in this nonsense, Tracy. Just Don, don't bother with this right
now. Don't start this, yo.
And obviously, Don says a protection security level of the war on drugs got one parent out of the house, sometimes two parents out of the house. Let's not forget that. Out of the house and made the other have to work OT and the other. That's true too. That's damn sure true. And other multiple jobs. Yes.
Oh, for sure.
Tyrone said he got the zip right there. Oh, come on, Tyrone.
Don't encourage her.
Come on, Tyrone. But you know what? I ain't mad at Tyrone. He gotta represent. So Harold was definitely distributing the money from the mattress.
Yo, that story. I know what story he's talking about. That story is absolutely insane. Wow. That story is insane. But anyway.
Wow.
All right. Listen.
All right. So let's kick it off, folks. Listen, Courtney introduced this topic for us this week. So Courtney, what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so we have a lot of things. So in terms of how it created, like I think a lot of people talked about it in the comments, but mass incarceration has basically decimated the Black community and the Black family. So that's a big thing. But before we even get into like the problems of the war on drugs, is that the war on drugs was specifically targeted to Black people. President Nixon, when he signed the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, said his policy advisor, his domestic policy advisor said, we couldn't make it illegal to be Black or be against the war. So what we did is we criminalized marijuana and heroin, and then we went into their communities and we are using that to destroy their communities and basically vilify them. And that's what they did. So I wanted to make it very clear when we have these conversations is that the war on drugs is doing exactly what it was supposed to do.
It was intentional.
It was extremely intentional. And it's been intentional since the turn of the 20th century. I mean, if you look at the conversation, Henry Anslinger has been taught like he was kind of like the poster child for like being against all drugs. And that was how he rolled through the beginning of the 20th century. He was at the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and he had a problem with Black people and he had a problem with Mexicans. And that's exactly what he was doing. So I share that to say the background is before we say, oh, you know, what happened to the Black community as a result of the war on drugs is that the war on drugs was actually targeted to the Black community. Because I don't want to get
Are you saying that the Democratic Party solely alone wasn't responsible for tearing up the Black family? Like some right-wing Black folks that have been paid to say that it's not true? That's
not true. Because Rick Nixon was a what?
Yeah.
A Republican.
Yes. So it's all camouflage, folks. It's all smoke and mirrors. But we here to set the record straight.
And neither party don't care about Black folks. Like we gotta get this.
I'm about to say you can't let them.
We gotta get this misconception about the parties caring about Black folks, man. Like Southern Democrats made they came up with the Black codes. So we can't. It doesn't really matter which party you talking about. Both parties have created legislation and then enacted that legislation and then acted on that legislation to purposely destroy Black people, right? So we're not going to get into the which party did what game. Like we not getting into that game. Like, let's be very clear about how this happened.
No.
They don't care about it.
No, hold on, Corey. I made that point last week, so I'm already there. However, I made that comment because there are Black folks running around trying to pit one party against the other and say one party is better than the other when they're both trash. Like I said last week.
Trash too. Then tell them they trash too. Like
let me
say, put them on my timeline and let me tell them.
No. But I'm just saying, no. But people are really regurgitating the stuff that these paid black ops are getting paid to do. So that's why I made a point, and especially last week and this week, to say that it wasn't the Republicans, it wasn't just the Democrats that destroyed the black family, because people are regurgitating that lie, and we know how lies get in our community. They catch on fire.
They pick up steam and then they become the truth.
Right, like Uncle Tom. Like we still use Uncle Tom as a disparaging remark.
And it wasn't him that was the villain.
Right.
So nope, that's true. But I think to the point, I wasn't trying. Again, we've had this conversation over and over again, but I think it's just really important to get the narrative right. Like who did what, and you can always get like, okay, the group, the R's did this, the D's did that. We can kind of write down a whole list of all the things that have happened against the black community, and like I don't know what the score would be, and I don't really very much care, because at the end of the day, we have been adversely affected across the board.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter. And why don't we just get into the work? Mass incarceration, which I think a couple of people will probably talk about, but civil asset forfeiture. You know who the biggest group of people who have completed civil asset forfeiture in the United States? Philadelphia. You know what Philadelphia is? It's run by Democrats.
Courtney, what is civil asset forfeiture?
So civil asset forfeiture is when the government seizes cash, real estate, cars, any other property that from a person suspected. This is a suspected person of being connected to a criminal activity. So for a great example, there's a grandmother who her grandson was living in her house. Grandson was running drugs out of grandma's house. What happened to grandma's house? Grandma's house was seized by the district attorney's office because there was criminal activity in her home. Not that she had anything to do with it. That's civil asset forfeiture. So what happens? You're taking our real estate, you're taking our cash. And if you look at the numbers, 71% of innocent people were African Americans who had cash taken from them.
Now, another question, quick follow-up question, Courtney. Is civil asset forfeiture only conducted on a local level, but is it local, state, fed? How does it run?
It's going to be state and feds. So feds can do it too. But for the most part, a lot of the states have done drug crime. So the feds don't always get involved. I mean, it's a federal law, but the states have the right to enforce federal laws also. So, and then most states also have drug laws. So I mean, there's a lot going on. But yeah, it can be done by the feds, but it can also be done by the states. But Philadelphia was the biggest offender in this particular area. I mean, we can just look that Philadelphia is smaller than Brooklyn, it's smaller than LA County, but it had twice the revenue from civil assets forfeiture than both of those places.
Over what time frame?
Yeah.
I believe 2002 to 2014, somewhere around there.
Jesus.
Yo, that's recent. I'm thinking Lynn Abraham days. This is
Lynn Abraham was part of 2000.
It's disgusting too, because they messed up those titles.
Titles are terrible.
No, but those titles too, like a lot of times they don't even do it right.
No.
And as someone who's on the very end of that transaction, when you try to acquire a property like that, it's become almost impossible trying to track down. So they don't even do it right.
Yeah.
And so Lynn Abraham, y'all brought up Lynn Abraham. Lynn Abraham was the district attorney in Philadelphia for quite some time, and she was definitely not pro-black, in my opinion.
At all. Yeah.
So all right. So we got civil forfeiture, we got mass incarceration. What else you got for us, Courtney?
Where's my other? Oh, community instability. So that's across the board. I think all of these things kind of come into the pot and create an unstable community. I mean, even in the sense of education, if you have, and I was looking on the FAFSA site just to see if I can get a little bit more information, but if you are convicted of a drug crime, you can't get any federal aid. So, and here's the other thing, the Anti-Drug Act of 1986 had juvenile provisions. So if you got jammed up in the system in your teens, and teens are just teens, they're just being teens. You get jammed up into the system as a teenager, you completely lose your ability to have federal funds used for your college. And there's a tweet going around, which I absolutely positively love. And the guy's telling a story. He's like, listen, if me and my white friends in the suburbs were ever stopped and frisked, half of them would have gone to jail for drugs. He said, but what happened is my friends went to college and those in the city went to jail.
Yeah, and that goes to the issue of over policing of Black communities and under policing, quote unquote, so-called white communities. But nobody likes to talk about that. But Tracy, you've been quiet. So what you got on this?
No, I mean, I feel the same way. I don't have a lot of statistics like everybody else, but I definitely see the criminalization of African Americans, especially African American men and boys, that happens very, very early, that strips them of their right to vote, that strips them of their right to be able to do a lot of things that allow them to acquire wealth in this country. And it starts with being deemed a criminal and what that means in this country, and what that means as far as taking away rights, and what that means as far as taking away the ability to do certain things, to work certain jobs, to own certain companies, to be able to be written into the fabric of wealth. And it's disgusting.
Okay. Malik, coming to you next. What do you think, sir?
Yeah, so I think something what Tracy was just talking about, you know, and also Courtney, there's a lot of licensure here in Pennsylvania that with a felony you can't get. You have to go through hell to get a real estate license, right, with the felony. I mean, there's plenty of licenses that you just can't do with the felony. But
you can't sell insurance.
You can't sell insurance.
Nope.
So I'll say this, right? So my cousin, right? I'm gonna go like very personal, right? My cousin like died in May in federal prison from COVID, right? He was there for a drug offense and he was sentenced to prison for 50 years, right? And we're going to talk about a couple of things now, how it affected the family financially. Like by the time you're paying for attorneys, by the time you just putting food on his books, to buy tuna, right? You know, he got kids in these streets that need help. And just the cost of the phone calls is absorbent. He's in federal expenses are cheaper than state. The state charges almost 3 times as much for like food, like noodles and stuff costs like 75 cents in the state, or whatever it is, in the state, like 25 cents in the federal, right? So he's a federal, but still there's an expense there. The cost to go see him, the cost to everything else, and he's federal, so he was away. But in fighting that case was even crazy is that I'm not saying that he was an angel. He sold a lot of drugs before he was convicted the first time. The second time, he was out of the game. Somebody else got jammed up. They said he sold me drugs. No, there's no other witnesses. There's no pictures. There's no phone tap. There's no drugs. It's just that somebody had drugs. They said, where you get them from? Did you get it from him? Yeah. So now he had to sit down, and the feds offered him 15 years, of which he did not agree to 15 years. So instead of taking that plea for 15 years, they sentenced him to 50 years. And so in his mind, he said, there's no way they can convict me of this crime with zero evidence, except somebody said I gave him drugs once upon a time. You know, and so then when you talk about just that and the amount of money and time that they spent, you know, on that is like, that's our taxpayer money is going for this crime, to lock up a person like $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year to keep him incarcerated. So then we're talking about tax rates. But like I said, the overall expense of being incarcerated is just a really high number. And then the people that do get out, they still got to pay for their parole. They got to pay. Sometimes they got to pay restitution. But the crime is like, it's super expensive, and all his wealth has been extracted from the Black community, you know, for time. And it's a difficult situation. And that's just one situation out of many.
Right. All right, Corey, what do you think about this?
Man, it's so many deep levels to this, right? But I'm going to really touch on the actual prison labor, right? So you get put in prison, and then they pay you 4 cents, 10 cents, 11 cents an hour to work. So basically, they just turned you back into a slave. right? And so you took this person, man or woman, out of their house, and they, where they could have been productive for their family, and then you turned them into an asset for the state, right? Or you turned them into an asset for the federal government. And so what happens is that's a transfer of wealth right there, because that work could have been used to build their own family, and that was being used to build the assets of either a private corporation or of the state and federal government. And we got plenty of examples of that, but I'm going to talk about in California, where they had them men out there fighting fires for like $2 an hour, and then they couldn't be hired as firefighters. Like, that doesn't even make sense. So with a federal crime, with a felony, they can't be hired as firefighters. So you giving them a skill in jail, they able to be paroled and come back into society, and then the skill that you teach them, they can't even use it in society because you can't be a firefighter with a felony, right? And so that's just one example, though, right? That there's hundreds of companies, right? Because I study the stock market that use prison labor. They use prison labor to manufacture and build. So they don't even outsource it to people be talking about how companies outsource to other countries to get cheap labor. They don't even have to outsource it. The reason why the prison population is so high is because a lot of companies use that private labor to build to build equity in their companies, or like the state does to build state equity. Right. And that's family equity, like Malik was talking about, that doesn't go to that specific family, that doesn't go into black wealth. Right. That they steal that time. Right. It's stolen from you. Right. So, and then I don't even want to talk about the stress that puts on families. Right. So Malik was talking about the stress from the aspect of how much money and how much time they got to spend visiting that person and fighting a case. And that's one heavy burden, right? But we're not even going to talk about the poor tax, right? How expensive it is to be poor, right? Because now you got to spend more time outside the home if you don't have a business, or if you do have a business, you got to keep extracting money from your business to pay for things that you shouldn't have to pay for, right? And so it is the snowball effect of being poor and then being criminalized for being poor is why we're in such a they talk about the wealth gap, right? The wealth gap is built in many different ways, right? And that's one of the ways the wealth gap is built. And then as an educator, I'd be remiss not to talk about how schools prepare kids for prison, right? Schools got bars on them, they got metal detectors, and they got cops in them. Where else do you find that at? Prisons. And so basically what's happening is you're preparing these kids, and then schools are sinister, right? In the way that they do things. And I'm going to say this, and like they prepare you to be a slave. They prepare you to be a slave to the system, right? Because from the time you're 5 or 6 years old, they prepare you to work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then they set you up to do it from the time you're 6 years old to the time you're 69 years old when you're supposed to retire. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to work from 9 till 5, because that's the hours for school generally, right? 8 to 3, 9 to 4, whatever. And then they set you up to do that for the rest of your life. That's what they set you up to do. So they're sinister in that way that they do that. Gotcha. And so that right there is another drain on black wealth, right? Because we're not being prepared to go and be and build wealth. We're being prepared to be slaves and servants to the system.
Gotcha. Coming to you next, Jimmy. What are your thoughts on this, sir?
I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about with this topic. So I was thinking about something that I could talk about that probably a little bit different, but you guys have touched on so many great pieces. The one thing I thought about was the marijuana laws, right? So how many folks were doing exorbitant numbers for marijuana sales or use? And now that the country has like a change in conscience and is legal in certain places, they can't even participate in that business because of those felonies, right? I'm always talking about books. There's a great book called Family Properties by Beryl Satter. And in that book, she talks about how the war on drugs is used in the real estate game. So when people would get felonies they were targeting minorities, they wouldn't be able to apply for certain loans. When it comes to like Section 8, if you were on that program, you couldn't live in a property. So if you were a father that they convicted of a crime, whether you were, guilty or not, you couldn't come home to your family. You couldn't live there. Because if you did try to live there, you wouldn't get certain funding that your family was, supposed to get. And I'll give a personal story since Malik want to share a personal story because the war on drugs affected like our family personally. I had a family member who was addicted to drugs, which is interesting now because now with all the drugs now they look at it as a sickness, a mental health situation as opposed to just being criminalized. But there. So growing up in Philadelphia during the crack era, I'm pretty sure all of us had family or someone we knew who was addicted to drugs. But I had a family member who was addicted to drugs, had a house, an amazing job, and the whole nine. And because of her addiction, ended up losing a home. And one of the things we don't talk about is a lot of addicts would sell drugs to get money to buy their drug, if that makes any sense. So got arrested, had to do time because of that low job, lost a home. And what we think about is that wealth that was lost there. You have years of not being able to participate in, 401k, 403b, whatever it may be. That property's value is probably 10 times what it was worth at that time. So there's wealth that way that we lose because of how we were criminalized and how we were treated as a community. And that's another way that the war on drugs has affected us. In so many ways, but I just think about all the properties lost, which is why I thought it was interesting that Courtney brought up, like, our assets literally our assets being lost. We talk about having a lack of assets. So the ones that we do accumulate, we need to hold on to them, right? So, we're already operating from behind in terms of having them, but now we're losing the ones that we do have. So that's problematic as well. But we could talk about this for hours, but those are the ones that come to mind for me is now having to navigate in the world with that felony, right? When your community was over policed. And statistically speaking, we don't use drugs at a higher rate than any other community, but we're punished for it at a way higher rate. So, But now we get these felonies, and these felonies sit on us, and they affect us for years, even beyond. We talked about the prison system, but even when you're out of prison, when you're on paper and things of that nature, it affects us for of our lives, and all that wealth that is lost in when you can't find a good job, right? That's a lot of wealth. So we're keeping this to black wealth. There's so much wealth lost with that.
Absolutely. I just looked up something real quick as you were looking up, Jimmy, and I just want to share this real quick. So it says approximately 39% of prisoners should not be in prison. Now, this is an article from Times from 2016, from December 2016, almost 2017. And so there's roughly 2.2 million people in jail. So, that's 4 times 2, we're talking about 800,000 people that are in jail. And that should not be because of the drug laws. And the majority of them, as we know, are black folks. So, I mean, we literally have hundreds of thousands, probably millions actually over the time, right? We literally have a system that that either died, came out, went back in due to recidivism rates and things like that. But we're talking about millions of people that were no longer there for their families, that were kidnapped a lot of times. Not all the times, but a lot of times. They were kidnapped from their families a lot of times. And like I think Malik said, and somebody else said that they weren't able to provide for their families. So that's a very, very, very major thing. So let's check in with the audience. I think we lost Courtney. I guess the internet is playing games. Those Russian bots are at work again.
COINTELPRO.
Yeah, man. She was giving out the real. She was giving out that real deal. They said she gotta go. She know too much.
You know what's funny though? Because when you look at the time, who was it? Edgar Hoover, that was in charge of COINTELPRO up until the late 60s, and then Nixon comes in and then institutes his program in the early 70s. So I mean, when you look at that close time period, it's like, wow, they were all kind of with the shit, so to speak.
Yeah. Hey, listen, man, I can name some other government programs that happened alongside outside those programs that, you know, Project Mockingbird and all kinds of, listen, man, people our government is sinister, man. Like our government do some real sinister stuff, man. And then, like stuff, the crazy part is the stuff that people find out about after the fact, and it be up in arms, like Iran Contra and stuff like that, because that was also part of the war on drugs, right?
Absolutely.
So, you know what I mean? Like, so, they don't just do that to us here, though. They criminalize brown people all over the world because that's where all the drugs are grown, in countries where brown people reside. So if you don't talk about black wealth being lost, we can talk about worldwide black wealth being lost because of imperialism. When they come in,
man, listen. Another quick book recommendation is called "The Confessions of an Economic Hitman," and it talks just about what you talked about: how government hires what they consider economic hitmen to go all across the world and create these things, and then people will find out. So we're conspiracy theorists, but it's Confessions of an Economic Hitman that gives you details and information about how sinister we are around the world.
Got you. All right, so let's check in with the folks real quick. Monica says a lot of grannies had to raise their grandchildren because they didn't want to see them kids lost to the system. Fact.
All facts.
Or put their houses up for bail.
Fact. We even talk about
that's another law, man.
Yeah. Well, Alexis Hartman, how you doing, Alexis? Thanks for joining us. That's the truth. Neither care about us. She's talking about the party.
I do want to say this on a national level. I mean, I know it's some politicians here in the local level that's really giving work, like really putting in good work for the people. So I do want to recognize that there are some good people locally that's really about it.
Absolutely, definitely good workers.
Yeah, Jordan Harris and the Clean Slate Bill I think is one of the. I think it's maybe either one of the first in the nation to really do that work, or at least if it's not the first, then it's actually probably the most progressive. So Pennsylvania legislators are really trying to get that work out, and I really appreciate what they're doing. So it's not, unfortunately, I think we sound like we're down on everyone. It's like, no, but I also think we have to realize that we're subject to the tyranny of the minority. So a lot of the things that, where we are and what we're looking at, our worldview is not being reflected in our governance. And that's a big deal.
Yeah, fact.
Absolutely. But realize, folks, we got talking about people talking about things from a generalized standpoint. Mm-hmm. So we're not necessarily targeting out individuals unless we actually at them or say their names, which we will do from time to time. All right. But hey, Marsha, how you doing? Welcome. So, Marsha says, because it was a war on drugs, there's a generation of people who grew up in foster care, no culture, no responsibility.
Correct.
Yeah, that's sad. Both parties trash, double facts. Absolutely. I want to say Mount Airy has like 4 zip codes. All right, I'm going to leave that alone. But it's out there. It's documented. Homes were lost because they were seen being used in drug activity. Yes, Monica.
Correct.
And here's the crazy thing. How many of those were misclassified? I mean,
not all of them, but a very large majority hit them.
Right. Hold on. Breonna Taylor isn't really new. Right. I mean, obviously, the circumstances of the case is different, but folks have lost stuff a lot of times just due to misclassification.
Correct.
And then the property is
a lot,
and they're still not even found guilty in court.
Yeah, that's true. That happens. And it's crazy. And just for clarification on Philadelphia, so Lim Abraham was DA from 1991 to 2010. And the civil forfeiture program, which actually does not exist in Pennsylvania anymore, for clarification, I believe it stopped in 2014. But it ran, its heyday was 2002 to 2014. So.
Ironic. Alexa says they don't have to charge the owners either.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
You can seize it and put it in a little room forever.
Yes, I process those docs all the time. The DA has seized a lot of real estate in Philadelphia. Yes.
Thank you.
FBI does it.
Yep.
I see properties deeded to the district attorney all the time, and once Granny or Mom Dukes is cleared of all wrongdoing, getting the property back is a nightmare.
Correct.
It is.
Correct.
And sometimes it never gets fixed. I mean, Jimmy said, like, it really messes up title. I mean, Philadelphia has probably some of the worst title issues that I've ever seen. And a lot of them are actually functions, not all of them, but a lot of them are functions of government malfeasance.
I think this is Aquila. I hope I'm saying your name right. If I messed it up, please let me know and correct me. But says this is so informative. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining.
Central alum, like I think 261. I think.
What year is that? Can we get a year? Can we get a year, please?
That got to be like 2001,
no, we don't listen, man. Don't tell him nothing, man. If he got to ask, then he don't need to know, man. Like we know what that means.
I'm not a part of the cult. I'm not a part. Y'all like the educational Illuminati. Angela Williams said, "What happens? What happens to assets seized?"
It depends. It depends. It can go into a room. It depends on what it is. So it can go into a room and locked away. If it is a property, it's usually like the sheriff will do a seizure. It's kind of like the DA will do a seizure. So they can actually take title to the property. It depends on what happens. I think more likely than not, they're usually auctioned. But I think someone said in the comments that it actually messes up the title too. So, and because it's not a clean sale. So they weren't required to do the type of level of sale that's done through the sheriff. They kind of just did it and just kind of let the chips fall where they may, which means that they may still have back property taxes, may have a water bill that they never cleared. I know personally that I've cleared water bills off of properties based on the old rules. And I had to go searching through the archives because, like I said, that rule does not exist anymore. So we had to figure out what the rules and regulations were when it came to getting rid of property taxes, when getting rid of water bills or water liens. Because when the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office does it, they sell free of all liens and encumbrances, but the DA's office didn't have the same rules and regulations. So it just made a really big mess. So unfortunately, Angela, it just really depends. And now, like, a lot of those assets are in limbo because, like I said, the program's done, but there's still a lot of loose ends out there.
And I don't know if we hit this right.
Those
and
assets,
I just wanted to make sure that we were very
right
clear on this. But these asset forfeitures were like a cash cow for these DA's offices. They were like
they were
a war chest.
They like a slush fund.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Hey, but listen, I don't. Do you remember?
Hold on, Jimmy. You were saying something, Jimmy.
No, she said, "What happens to the asset seized?" No, can you hear me? I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. You want to
COINTELPRO got me. I was saying when she asked what happens to the asset seized, I was saying they right next to the dreams deferred. That's all I said.
Ooh.
Good one. Go ahead, please.
I don't know what I'm saying now. Thanks, like I lost my thought, but I lost my thought. I don't even know what I'm saying.
Okay.
All right. Lynn Abraham, Todd says Lynn Abraham was a huge part in a lot of the seizures. Absolutely.
We know, Ty. We know.
Monica Williams, but is it possible for them to actually get the property back? So is it possible to get asset for seized property back?
It is. So first they have to be cleared of all wrongdoing that had to do with the particular seizure. So they actually have to engage counsel for something they had nothing to do with. So that's another outlay of money, kind of talking about black wealth. That's another outlay of money, and it's civil. So you don't really get the same protections that you would in a criminal case, because criminal, you can be appointed as a public defender. With civil, yeah, you might be able to get some legal services, but you might not. So that's the first thing. They have to be cleared of any wrongdoing. Then they have to go to court and kind of petition to have it back. I think they said during the process, it would probably take them about 10 trips to court, which means they had to take off of work if they were working, because court only operates during, regular business hours, to get the property back. So.
Gotcha. What up, Willard? Thanks for joining us. Hey, Willard, I see you did a superstar interview on Bob Hood. Everybody go check out that interview as well with Willard Cooper. Willard says, I bought numerous properties in the early 2000s from the DA's auction. You would go into these properties and it was like time frozen. Everything would still be there. TVs, dishes, cards on the TV on the table. However, the titles were cloudy, like everybody's been saying. And I still have 5 that I'm about to finally clean up with a quiet title auction or action. Quiet title action, excuse me.
Yep, it's a mess.
It's a mess.
What is a quiet title action?
So a quiet title is basically cleaning up a title. It's vesting a property in a party that may or may not be on the chain of title. It's basically quieting the title to any other owners. That's kind of what quiet title means. But it basically clears up any confusion about who the current owner is of the property. And sometimes it actually is somebody who's not even in the chain of title or who's actually ever owned the property. Sometimes it's the third party. You're doing adverse possession, you would do an action in quiet title to quiet the title to other people to vest it in yourself. So
Gotcha. I see Courtney's in the comments. Once you're on the system, you have a scarlet letter.
Yep.
Monica says programs like Section 8 prohibit anyone with a felony from living in a property approved for. And it was funny. I was thinking about that because I've known people getting kicked out of Section 8 because they were dealing drugs, kind of like grandma losing her house. Grandma lost Section 8. And that's sad too, because then they probably have to go pay higher rent somewhere to live that might not be as nice.
Probably.
I'm gonna just correct that real fast. To correct that, you can't have a drug charge felony within 7 years. A misdemeanor is like 1 to 3 years, but a felony within 7 years.
Okay, I was talking about the actual, like the timing if somebody raids a property.
No, I was talking about Monica's comment. The section 8.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Programs like Section 8 prohibit anyone. Gotcha.
Right. So yeah, you can't. It's 7 years.
Yeah.
Before anyone can live in an apartment.
Got you.
Correct.
So Karan says, man, they're using juvenile offenders to fight those fires also. I didn't know that.
I know that.
That's crazy.
That's sad.
That's real sad.
Yep.
School to prison pipeline. Now you have privatization of prisons. Yes.
So I want to talk about the timeline of the privatization of prison. So the first private prison, which is actually Core Civic, which was previously Correctional Corporations of America, they started in 1984. Interesting enough, they're a REIT, which is a real estate. What is it? Investment trust. Oh, gracious. I'm having brain farts all over tonight, y'all. I'm sorry. But so interesting enough. So they're not taxed on the corporate level. They're only taxed on the distributions. Listen, that's really stressful. But anyway, I give this background to say 1984 is when they first operated and they took over a prison in Tennessee. But to add to that kind of the fuzziness, the cloudiness to go, something's really, really wrong in the water, is you have the Anti-Drug Act of 1986, which added mandatory minimums. And the mandatory minimums, this is where that crack cocaine differentiation came into play. So you would get charged more for crack than you would for the same amount of cocaine, like astronomically more. And I share that with people to say, that's kind of where, but the mandatory minimums kind of fed that privatization of prison. So it's like, okay, you started in 1984, then in 1986, there's this line of legislation. Right, that actually fed into these private prisons. And then on top of that, then you had the Crime Bill of 1994, which was the 3 strikes rule. So then that's kind of, Kamari, you earlier talked about recidivism. So you had people going back into the system. And once you get 3 times and you're out. But here's the other problem is that if you're going to look for something, you're going to find it. So it just puts you back into the system over and over again. And, the real winners are not people. It's the prisons.
And I just want to say this real quick. So I know my prisons, the private prisons are trash. Like they're worse than many of the state and federal run prisons. All types of things and shenanigans happen, from rape, murder. Yes, they happen in the state run institutions, but these are more atrocious. And here's the thing. Courtney said they are registered as REITs. They are. Most of the private prisons are. And they pay a really attractive dividend. But I personally, I won't invest in any of them. I can't knowingly invest in the pain, especially the pain that's been associated with Black folks.
I bet
the dividends might look sexy, y'all. But again, for me, I wouldn't invest in any of them. I get questions about those all the time.
It's blood.
Go ahead.
But listen, I bet you
blood money
are invested in them through their 401k.
Well, no, not necessarily through their 401k. Well, maybe through their 401ks, but definitely probably through their pensions also.
Correct.
Yeah.
401k usually have a very limited amount of funds. They're usually mutual funds. Mutual funds, there's not a lot of mutual fund REITs that are actually available in 401k. So I'll just clarify that point.
Gotcha.
But I would bet they're definitely in a pension plan.
Are any of them in Are any of them in the S&P?
They.
I don't think so, but I would double check. I'm not going to stand on that.
I think what GCA is the big one, and
no, Geo Group is the big one.
Core Civic is the big one.
Yeah, Core Civic's a big one too.
Yeah, they're not. Neither one of those are in the S&P.
Yeah, I don't think either one of them above $5 billion in market cap. But all right, as we continue along, remember everybody, you're watching the Black Wealth Project. We are on every week, every Sunday at 7 p.m. So make sure you tune in, put us on your calendar, make sure you chime in and check us out, because we're trying to have higher level conversations. In order to change the culture around money in our communities, we got to be able to have a higher elevated conversation. So help us out, share it out. We're fighting the algorithm, so do us that favor. Somebody
I was saying the Geo Group is in the S&P. It's actually an S&P 400 company. It's one of the top 400 companies in the world.
Yeah, I just saw that too, Jimmy. That's what I was looking.
What's the market cap on that?
Let's see.
Curious.
What's there?
Doesn't really matter though. All right, so Marsha had a question while Jimmy's looking it up. She said, "What is the recommendation you have to keep school safe?" I'm not sure if I understand that question as it relates.
She's probably talking about me when I was talking about how they have cops and metal detectors and all of that kind of stuff. Gotcha. And I can give you a recommendation. You can make the educational programs relevant to the students, and it would cause less fights. You can bring back programs like sports and like music and like art and things that kids enjoy, and that would bring down the actual fights. So that would bring down the cultural competence, cultural relevancy, and actual programs that kids like. It would keep them engaged, and engaged people tend to get into less stuff. Like when you got more money, you're more engaged in getting money than you are in getting into trouble most of the time. So that's why more people that have more money tend to get into less physical crime than people who are poor people, right? So it's the same thing with the schools. You tend to get into less physical altercations when you're more engaged. And so if you're going to create a safer space, you have to create more engaged spaces. Mm-hmm. So that's how you create safer spaces.
Gotcha.
That's a great one. To answer your question, Geo has a market cap of $1 billion, and Core Civic has a market cap of $791 million. So relatively small.
Yeah.
Geo paying a 15% dividend.
That's fact. Yeah. Core Civic doing.
Let's not make it too sexy for him, Jimmy. We don't want to entice him.
No, I'm just stating facts. I'm just stating facts.
I
see Malik grabbed his phone up. I see Malik grabbed his phone and bought 100 of them real quick.
Yeah. That's how David Ruffin get down, y'all. All right, so Lynette Wright says, "Thank you for discussing the school system. I was brought up in a Montessori and Catholic school. I just knew my mother put me there because they were better, but didn't really know what that meant." Yeah.
I'm a Montessori Catholic girl. Yay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
So Wanda says they start keeping track of your behavior in school. To join the military, they ask you if you've ever been suspended from school and want to know the reason for suspension. I didn't know that.
Oh, I'm a military vet, and they never asked me that. Because if they my school record was available to them, and I got suspended about 30 times from school. So if that was a prereq for not going to the military, I never would have made it. Never would have made it.
Well, listen, y'all. As y'all see, we are a very diverse group here. We got some folks who've been suspended more than 30 times. God damn, Corey.
Yo, listen, I got suspended 5 times in my 9th grade year for not going outside during the fire drill.
Outside the fire drill.
I ain't mad at that. I got suspended for that too.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, it's too cold for that shit.
All right. So Wanda also says now they want to help people with drug issues since the drugs start to spill into other neighborhoods. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so Willard says mass incarceration of the 80s lines up with the teenage years into a young adult. It was during my last year of high school that the crack gang was on the rise. My closest friends and I went to college, but many of others' friends and cousins were gobbled up into the drug gang. By the time the mid-90s came around, numerous of my friends and cousins were locked up, paroled, or dead. This was unlike our parents. Many of us had both parents, and very few of our fathers were locked up.
Wow.
Yep.
Damn.
Wow. That's powerful.
All facts. All facts.
Sheesh.
So yeah, so when these political folks like to say that whatever party messed it up, you can say no, both parties messed up the black community. And I think
look at the bills, the 1986 bill and 1994 bill. I'll just leave it at that. You can go look at the congressional record yourself.
But I mean, even the fact that a president said that black people are the enemy of the country, it means something.
Oh.
Okay. So Monica says Tango title is such a big issue in Philadelphia, the city had to create a Tango program fund.
They're expensive. Tango titles, to undo a Tango title is about $25,000.
Damn.
Oh.
Damn.
Okay.
Let me ask you this though, real quick. We're talking about this incarceration, right? What do we think is going to happen in December when Mexico legalizes marijuana throughout the country?
Well, nothing, because the same thing with so let's be very honest. I think all that's going to do is politically push the United States. We're going to basically be in a sandwich. Canada legalized in 2018, and technically, let's be very honest. So Mexico actually didn't legalize, but they said that to have a rule against having a prohibition on marijuana was unconstitutional, and they decided that last year. Or even the year before. So they're now coming up with legislation. They've been working that long to come up with a legalization structure, which is more so a taxation structure than it is.
Correct.
So to your question about what's going to happen, nothing. The United States is just going to be embarrassed. That's it. Because you have these two, quote, what we feel like are inferior countries. I don't think they're inferior, but that's how some people look at them. Like, oh, these two inferior countries, they've legalized marijuana before we have. And it's like, well, so, I mean, but I think the only thing that'll do is kind of push us to move forward. That's all it's going to do. Nothing more. Because it has to change from Canada.
Malik, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Malik, what's going to happen is your IG page is going to be just like it was during the pandemic. Everybody's going to be in Mexico.
Everybody going back to Tulum.
Everybody will be in Mexico.
Everybody will be in Tulum for sure.
They already in Mexico.
Yeah, everybody going to Mexico and Jamaica right now.
Atlanta. They're going to Atlanta.
So Marsha says assets being seized affects property taxes, which causes cities not being able to fund school districts. Domino effect.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
That's a really good.
I agree.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Very good point.
But I agree with that.
Wait a minute. Hold on, Tracy. I didn't get you. What you say?
No, I said I agree with that. I just feel like the school district got its own problems, though.
Well,
yeah, and that's helping to add to those problems.
Agreed.
But our system on property tax funding education is archaic
and
ridiculous. And your zip code should not dictate the quality of your education. And I think that is abysmal. And it's just we just have to get rid of the practice. It's sickening. So yeah, she makes a very valid point because that is the system, but that's not the way the system should be.
So Wayne Terry asks, how many black Dems supported Lynn Abraham who are still in office? That's a great question. And I think there are quite a few that are still in
office.
They still around.
I know. Yeah, I know a lot of them that did, but I'm gonna be quiet on that because I know I'm gonna be quiet on it. I'm gonna be quiet on that one.
I don't want no trouble.
You want no smoke.
Court and those REITs, the dividends aren't saying yes. Yes, they are. Yeah. Okay. Don shared an article on the juvenile fighters.
Wow.
Ooh. When do we census? When we do a census, prisoners are counted where they're in prison, which means they can be counted in the count row. So this helps gerrymandering to a large degree.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I talked about this pre-show, but I ain't really want to get into this because specifically this right here is this is like super taxation without representation. Correct. Like they work you, then they use you for their count, and they get a higher, they get more funds and more political clout for bodies that don't belong to that county, and then those bodies aren't even they're not counted.
That's so evil.
It is, yeah. It's like I said, our government is sinister, and so you have to understand, like, what the purpose of the government isn't to serve the people anymore. It says that in our Constitution, and those words are used, but if you look at what the government does instead of listening to what they say, you can see exactly what they do. The purpose is never to serve the people; it's to serve the purposes of the government. Whoever is in charge of it.
You could argue that since damn near the ratification of the Constitution. I mean, we got Trail of Tears, we got Tuskegee experiment. I mean, just so many things. So many things.
You got to look at what people do and stop listening to what they say.
Absolutely. All right, Don, put up 12 major. Yeah. I don't even really want to promote that, though, to be honest with you. Not that I want to restrict y'all investments, but yeah, I'm just not a fan of it. Marcia says, thanks for the explanation on Safe School. Excellent points.
That was really good, Corey.
Me either. Wadia, how you doing, Wadia? USMC.
Hey, Wadia.
United States Marine Corps.
So she said
she didn't get asked the question about yeah, but you'll see in the comments later that they say it's recent. It's something more recent.
Oh, okay. All right, that's okay. That's a new question for military recruits. Gotcha.
Wow.
That's good to know. That's good to know. They asked my son and he graduated in 2017. Got you.
Okay.
Got you. I did goody two shoe. I did goody two.
I think she went to Central with us too. I think she did.
Oh man, damn it! Goddamn educational Illuminati. I'm joking, y'all. I got love for my Central folks. Don Johnson, active duty, and they asked that now. Got you. Suspended for not going out during the fire drills.
I don't understand.
Exactly.
They get caught. Listen, Katisa, you down in North Carolina, right? But we up here in Philly, it be cold. Like,
if they're having a fire drill during gym, and I got on gym shorts and a t-shirt in the middle of the wintertime, yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna go to my locker, and you can suspend me. You can send me home for them 2 days or whatever days. I'll be back when y'all say I can come back.
What's up, Molly? And he's saying Tulum, the new spot. Is I guess
yeah, they only place that don't care about COVID.
Correct. no test going in or coming out.
All right, Adrian says, I don't understand why they won't reintroduce shop in high schools.
They need to.
Mechanics and electricians make money. Classes, construction, plumbing, and even entry into IT should be provided.
Adrian, you know why? You know why?
One at a time, y'all. One at a time, y'all.
I need sheetrock. I need plumbers. I need all of that, man. Forget IT. I need hands-on. I need blue collar.
And let's talk about home economics. Like that was
people
very
can't cook.
Yeah, that's true. But Corey made a very valid point earlier. Go ahead, Corey. I mean, Jimmy. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say we know the answer to that question. We know why. I mean, we don't know why, but we know why.
Correct.
All right, tell them why, Jimmy. Tell them.
No, I mean, if you look at the data, right? The data shows that when they had those in the schools, that a lot of us were able to come out and have jobs and create businesses and take care of our families. Once it's removed, like there's actual data that shows that. Yeah, there's actual data that shows that once it's removed. Exactly.
Listen, we got to say these things, y'all.
But I think that also provides an opportunity for us to create those spaces, because I think we rely entirely too much on public education to do the work that we should be doing in our community.
Amen.
But here's the other thing is that if I'm paying property taxes, I need it to be going to something productive. But to the other point about the testing, all we do is test our kids. There's a test for the test, about the test, to protect it. Listen, life is not about a test all the time, but they are obsessed with these metrics, and you can't sit here and measure if somebody can, hammer something properly. They just can't measure that in a way. So it's just kind of, it doesn't go into their very small educational framework. And the only people that really get, the short end of the stick are students of color. But again, that's why we have to create something that works for them and that promotes us. You know, we don't have enough people in real estate. We don't have enough appraisers. So when it comes back, when we get bad appraisals in our areas, we look around like, what are we going to do? No, we need more Black appraisers. We need people across the board. But at the end of the day, we have to kind of bring them in. We're going to have to, because nobody else is not going to do it for them.
I agree.
Happen.
I agree. All right, Lynette says, "Yo, these books y'all recommend are not at my public library. New York Public Library isn't about ref." Yo, low key, our audience is all comedians, y'all.
Correct.
They got bars.
Correct. Go to Amazon, Lynette. Go to Amazon.
Yeah, go to Amazon. All right, what do you say? Hey.
Hey, what's going on?
What's your arch rival?
Oh, boo!
The Northeast.
Not Northeast. No.
I still love you though.
So Rahm Emanuel closed over 50 some odd schools in Chicago a few years ago. Neighborhood population, which was generally poor, was moving out because, in my opinion, crime is allowed to flourish. And of course, the tax base was low, so there was no funding. Yeah, I mean, the honest to God's truth is a lot of times we have this old infrastructure with these school systems, and the school population has dwindled, and there's no kids in these schools. A lot of people get tied to the schools instead of the overall education. But I mean, I get it too. Why are people moving out? And that's definitely a good question. Wait a minute. I skipped over one. Where we at? Delaware has trade schools. People need to go to school. Board meetings, get involved. I agree.
Well, Philadelphia just got our school board back, though.
Yeah. We was taken over by the state, so we didn't have a school board for a minute.
All right, Adrian says we need to create our own schools or mentoring programs so these kids can get into these fields. Of course, there should be a mandatory class in finances as well. I agree.
Yes.
You agree?
Correct.
I don't think I really want the teacher teaching my kid finance, but quite honestly, I don't.
Yeah.
I respect that.
That's true. That's a good point.
You talking about the public school, Malik?
Yeah. Any school.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I respect that.
Yeah, I want that.
They have all the kids buying Geo.
Exactly.
CDs or CDs. Just put your money in a CD.
Yeah.
I mean, but if we were to partner with some folks, you know, I've done some youth stuff. You guys have your own camp. Like if we were to do something or partner with somebody, we could definitely teach finance to our kids on the Saturday
I ain't
school
gonna
board.
lie. I've been asked to partner with school districts that are PWI, and I've said no because they were PWI.
So
Right, but that wasn't what I was talking about. I was talking about for our community specifically.
I'm just saying, like other communities recognize what we do, and they've asked me to partner with them. And I've been in specific individual classrooms in Philadelphia, but the Philadelphia public school system is not having this. They're just not, because they're so focused on testing that they don't think kids have enough time to do anything else.
Correct.
Corey dropping bars. What you got, Malik?
I'm in the trenches every day, dog. I don't gotta guess. I don't gotta guess at these things. Like
Hey,
these are things I know.
Hey man, it ain't an argument. I'm just saluting the genius. That's all. That's all.
Yeah, so I did want to mention, like one of our very first episodes, I mentioned that I was paying for some students at Vaux High School. That program started 3 weeks ago, and Candace Presley, she has her class, a real estate class, and so we started. So we got 6 kids at Vaux. You know, I financed the real estate class, and Candace and I come in every Tuesday, and their teacher, another ENS alum, Mama Jackie, she's teaching the kids. Then Tuesdays we come in, and by the end of the class, you know, should the kids stay interested, they'll finish with their real estate license, right? So we are also putting some of the finance right into that program.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome.
That's dope.
Super dope.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right, so ID is cleaning it up. She said her brother's a central man.
That's what's right. My daddy's a central man.
He's 254, Corey.
It's 254.
No.
Convicts. Wait. Let me read the question, Tracy. What are your thoughts on Dr. Umar? Controversy is
no, the school idea, not him. The thoughts on the school idea.
I love it.
The idea is dope. The idea is dope.
his execution and him being a part of it is trash.
Trash.
Donations.
Donations.
Grip money.
Yeah,
Give
my
me
man.
your grip money. Give me your grip money.
Yeah, man. Listen, if he can execute that idea without him being part of it, I'd be all for it.
All right, so Adrian says, I asked my cousin who has his own real estate business and is an appraiser what it takes to become one. He said it's a 3-year process, very challenging, very corrupt in Illinois. I may still research and pursue. Yeah,
do it.
Break down them barriers.
We need more Black appraisers, and there is literally going to become an entire opening for Black appraisers in the state of Pennsylvania because most of our appraisers are aging out of the industry, and we do not have a opening for most Black appraisers. So if you're interested in the field, please get into it. Please start researching and taking whatever apprenticeships and classes you need to, because there's going to be a literal entire call for all appraisers, and they're going to open up what the requirements are soon.
Hey, Jimmy and Corey. Jimmy and Corey.
About appraisal.
Have either one of y'all interviewed an appraiser for About a Hood?
No. We haven't, but I do. I want that, right. So I'm very field. I actually have an appraisal license. I have an appraisal license, but mine is for government appraisals. I'm working on getting it reciprocal so I can do private appraisals as well.
Jimmy, please repeat that again.
Tracy's point, the average age. Yes.
Yeah, repeat that again because COINTELPRO is jacking us up.
Oh, they got me again. My bad. I said I actually have an appraisals license, but I'm licensed to do government appraisals and modeling work. But with that being said, it's possible to get the license converted with through be able to do private appraisals, something that I'm working on. But with that being said, what I do know about the industry, and Tracy is right, the average age of an appraiser in Pennsylvania is like 68 years old. So it's going to be wide open. But with that being said, the whole industry is changing and technology is changing that industry as the same way as that it's revolutionizing every other industry. So this is where math comes into play because statistical models are the future of appraisal. So it's not going to be what it once was with appraisers. The numbers will be derived from looking at data points. So that's something that we should be working on now, which is another reason why I wanted to bring up all this math earlier, because that's the future of appraisal.
Correct.
Gotcha. Good points. All right. So sad. Yes. Local politics control so much of our daily lives. We must vote with a plan. Submit our demands if not met. Yeah, but in order to submit our demands, we have to be in some kind of unified fashion in order to enforce whatever those demands are. So we got a unity problem, folks. We need more love. More love. Can we work together?
And organization.
Right. Say that again, Tracy.
I said and organization.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, yeah, that was my whole thing with the unity organization. Yes, you are correct. Alton says, I think the kids relate more with mentoring programs than with schooling.
They do. Facts.
Mm-hmm.
Facts.
That's facts.
That's facts.
Lots of people think the schools are responsible to teach our children. Hey, Kim, by the way, thanks for joining us.
Okay.
I mean, look at now. People are complaining all day. They aren't teachers, and it's not their job to teach their children. Like what happened to parents being their kids' first teachers? I agree with that too.
That's also true.
Mm-hmm.
But to push back against that a little bit, that's what I was talking about with the 8-hour workday. You see what I'm saying? If parents have an 8-hour workday that coincides with their children's schooling, then how are their children supposed to get schooled? Correct. And that's the point that I was trying to make about how sinister the whole setup is.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
I agree.
Don Johnson said that idea was on point.
For Umar.
Oh, okay.
Don't laugh at me. Don't encourage me.
The apparel's coming, Alton. The apparel's coming.
Yeah, come on. Where's the apparel?
Thank you for that, Elton.
Yeah, Courtney, where's the apparel?
Hey, so listen, Jimmy and Knox talk yesterday about that also. So
Monica says, I'm not an Umar fan, but as a boarding school kid, boarding school can divide families. I know this from experience. There are pros and cons of that kind of educational experience.
I've seen a few.
Yep. Went to McKinley Tech in Northeast DC. And they had trades. I took electrical wiring, and while I didn't become an electrician, it pays off every day to this day. Thankful for that. Definitely will keep our youngsters employed and on the other side of the bars. But hey, such is the system that's built to keep us under. The less opportunity for us, the more likely we'll end up in the prison system. I think someone said it, maybe Courtney. We need to develop these programs at the community level.
It was me.
Yes, give that lady her props. Give her flowers.
I appreciate that, Marshall. I appreciate that. It wasn't me though, but it's true. I mean, I think he said it. I mean, he said it earlier in the conversation. Basically, like idle hands in the devil's workshop. I mean, that's really what it is. If you engage the kids, then we won't have a lot of the problems that we have because basically you're like a babysitting service.
Correct.
Karan says I can help with the power. Yeah, Karan, you can. Yeah, we'll talk. Wayne Terry, to the real estate folks, I would like to know your thoughts about Philadelphia City Council staying the tax abatement for 3 years.
I'm a fan of the tax abatement.
Filmer.
I am too.
I am too. I am 3.
So
I think a lot of people don't think about Philly pre-tax abatements. Go ahead, Jimmy. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Now, all I'm saying is I know what the data says, and a lot of times people like to argue based upon emotions without looking at the data. Mm-hmm. But that's all.
What's the data, Jimmy? Damn it! What's the data, man?
I mean, to make it very simple, it's been successful. Let's just leave it at that. It's been very successful.
Right. So I talked to an economist who's a big economist on this white guy out of Drexel. I forget his name on the top of my head, but he said for $1 that's spent on abatements, it usually generates $3 in city revenue or city economic activity, to be more precise.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a no-brainer. But go ahead, y'all. I'm sorry.
But I think the thing is, people have to understand that, like, basically, you're taking a likely unproductive property.
Correct.
You're making it productive. In order for you to make it productive, you have to pull permits. Permits are not cheap.
Correct.
The city, that money goes directly to the city. And not only that, you actually have to have laborers in, doing the work.
Correct.
So again, you have all of this going on. I can't tell you, I have a property going on right now. I can't tell you how much business the local KFC is getting. Listen, I feel like my project is keeping the local KFC in business, y'all.
I don't know how we got here.
There's so many questions, but again, it's really important that we have to understand. I think we have to get to the question about what is a tax abatement. So, tax abatement is a reduction. You're basically taking. So there's 2 sides of taxes. You have the improvement, which is the building. Then you have the land. And the abatement is in Philadelphia is a 10-year tax abatement, which means you're not paying taxes on the improvement. Let me clarify. It depends on how much taxes you're going to pay. Sometimes you complete abatement 100% that you're not paying on any of the improvement, but you're paying on the land. But it also depends on how much work you have done. So you have like a partial rehab all the way to a full rehab. If it's a partial rehab, you get a partial abatement. If it's a full rehab, you'll get a full abatement. So it's just kind of like on a sliding scale. Wow. But Philadelphia has one of the most liberal of the Commonwealth. I think Pittsburgh's is like maybe 5 years. But Philadelphia actually has, out of the entire 67 counties of Pennsylvania, we actually have some of the most dilapidated housing stock. And a lot of our houses are close together. And when you have dilapidated housing stock, a lot of houses that are close together, and then you also have and they're also old. So you have an archaic electric system. And then you also may have a heating or plumbing issue. What do you think happens to those houses? We have a lot of fires. They move quickly. Not only do we have a lot of fires, but we also have a plumbing problem, you have a roofing problem, you have basically the back of the property that's gone because you have a roofing issue. But that affects other properties because we have so many row homes. So we have a lot of different issues in the system that actually the tax abatement helps. So I know a lot of people don't like it because I think they feel like it helps aid gentrification. And to a certain extent, it may, and it does, but it's putting productive properties back on the tax rolls. And that's what we actually do need to increase our tax base, because Philadelphia's tax base, it has dwindled in the last maybe 20 years.
Yeah, longer than that. But I just want to piggyback on this, right? When tax abatements actually came through, Philly wasn't popping like that. Philly started to pop after the tax abatements got there because nobody wanted to move to Philadelphia.
That's correct.
That's part of the reason why nobody wants to buy Chester.
Right. And so you have to incentivize people to move into an area that's not as desirable as your other places. Like cities and states are competing for residents every day. So you got to do something to figure out how to get folks in there.
Hey,
it's
can we save some of this for the gentrification episode just a little bit?
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
It would have been nice to know that there was an actually gentrification episode, but that's typical David Ruffin style. You walk right into that, Malik. I'm sorry.
Y'all wouldn't be nothing without David Ruffin.
Exactly.
Ain't nobody coming to see you, Otis.
Good old Eddie Kane. All right, Adrian says, as we begin to wrap up, folks, Adrian says there are over 100,000 gangbangers in Chicago. And I wonder what the numbers will look like for mentoring or vocational programs run by us. We need to move quickly.
Can you dig it, suckers?
That was New York. That wasn't Chicago.
It's 100,000 gangs.
The Warriors quota is dead on now. Kahan says our people perish for lack of knowledge. The forum is Sunday service. This forum is Sunday service. I like that. Sunday service. All right, Marcia says
pass the plate around.
All right. Tax abatement is great for business. What happens to school funding? So here's the thing: a lot of people don't realize that a lot of school funding, at least in Pennsylvania, is supposed to come from the state. It does not. They are not upholding their constitutional responsibility.
And the other portion, I don't think people realize too. If you have some of these dilapidated properties and these vacant lots, and I don't want to go too heavy into it because again, we're going to talk about this with the gentrification conversation. These lots that are sitting here right now are only $100 a year for taxes, of which $2 goes to the school district right now.
Yep.
In the dilapidated properties. So if we put new construction with a 10-year tax abatement, which means it'll reassess in 10 years with the new value, you could potentially get $200 to the school district.
Right. But also, I think people need to understand is that a lot of the business taxes actually, I think it's the BERT goes to the school district. So there are some Philadelphia taxes that go directly to the school district that are not related to property. So I think that's just something else that people don't understand our tax base. And because of that, they kind of look at houses and saying that's the only way our schools are getting funded. That's not true. So I think we also need to clear that up too. Philadelphia has a lot of taxes. If you are a business owner, you're taxed on taxed on tax. And even if you listen, that's a whole other episode. How you getting taxed? 3 ways.
He's your voice.
Yep. All right, so real quick. All right, Praise and Hustle. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate you being here. It looks like I think we have a consensus, right? So before it's even started, David Ruffin strikes again. God damn Eddie Kane. Next week's episode, gentrification. Everybody wants to see it. I'm with it.
Right before election day, let's do it.
I'm with
it.
I mean, we can solve gentrification. We can solve gentrification in one sentence. Own some shit. Buy the hood. That's it. Buy the hood. We done.
I would push back on that a little bit, especially when you got hedge funds buying.
I know you would.
But yeah, I agree with you though.
Listen,
it was actually 2 things. We should buy the hood, and we should also clean up our hoods because that'll help maintain real estate values. But yeah, I'm with it. But listen, folks, we got some homework for y'all because we have another show planned that we're coming in the next few weeks. And I got this book this week, and this is a recommendation from Malik Carter. He wants to do an episode on Powernomics, and I agree. Great book by Dr. Claude Anderson. Started reading it before I met Dr. Claude many, many years ago. So listen, here's the homework, folks. We want y'all to buy the book. If you don't have the book, buy the book and read along with us as we break it down.
So Dr. Anderson has a website. You could buy it directly from Dr. Anderson without paying Amazon or anyone else if you choose to. Powernomics.com, I think it is.
Yes, it comes in about 2 to 3 days. I mean, it's really fast. I was really shocked at how quickly it came.
All right, so we're just gonna bang through these next couple questions real quick before we wrap up. Again, we appreciate you all. $2 to the school. Okay. That's the admission fee. Well, it says another great show, great dialogue. I'm empowered.
Thanks, Willard.
Appreciate you, Willard. Khan says, so much nuggets being dropped. Yes, the forum. How about reduce the amount of years on the tax abatement? Also, schools need a better local funding. I mean, you know what? We'll say that for the gentrification episode. Yep. So y'all remember, tune in next week for the gentrification episode.
I appreciate that. All right.
Wanted to buy an empty lot until they said 200K. And that hot spot. If you're in a hot spot, the lot gets hot. The block is hot. Right. Hi, Cherie Adams. How you doing? Thanks for joining us.
Hiya.
All right, yeah. All right, so listen, as a run up to next week, right? So in exchange for admission, we need y'all to share this out. And when we drop the link for next week, we need all of y'all to share it out so we can get as many people as possible on that live on Sunday service, the Black Wealth Project weekly town hall meeting. Excuse me, folks. I caught a brain fart right there too. All right, so Don Johnson said he's reading Powernomics. Great. Buy from Black Bookstore. Yes, but buy directly from Dr. Anderson. It's his book. Buy it directly from him so he can get all the proceeds. If you can't get the Dr. Anderson for whatever reason, then go to a Black Bookstore. All right, but in no way, shape, or form should we be going to Amazon to get this book. Mm-hmm. All right, folks. All right. So listen, everybody, we appreciate you all being here. Appreciate the time we spent together. This is a great time. Make sure y'all go out and y'all spread a good word to your people that you run into every day. All of y'all be blessed, and we will see you back next week for the gentrification episode. Bye-bye.
Sure.
Bye.
Peace.